Very good evening to all our viewers and friends at home in Guyana and across the world. This is Globespan 24/7, our Monday night program. Normally we'll have Dr. Rose with us, but he's stuck in traffic here in New York. But he'll be on with us shortly. So I want to thank all of you for joining in tonight to be with us. We want to thank Nohar Singh to giving us this platform, and of course to Devin, our technical specialist. This evening, we are so honored to have with us a person who is no stranger to the body politic of Guyana, the religious politic of Guyana. Dr. Persaud is in a very coveted spot in Guyana's politics. I believe that this might be the only dual person where father and daughter held ministerial portfolio within the PVP administration, if ever any administration. That must have been a great honor for you, Dr. Persaud, this evening to know that you're following the footsteps of your dad.
Good evening, and thank you for having me on today's program. I am very delighted to be able to share some of what ministry is doing. And yes, it is indeed an honor to serve the people of Guyana, much as my father did for most of his life. So I look forward to not only following in his footsteps, but for being as humble and as sincere in what I do as he was during his life and his tenure in politics and as a minister of government.
And again, we want to welcome you to the program tonight. Minister, you're a minister of the government. You're the president of the Dharmic Sabha. You're a dance teacher. You're the administrator of Ramakrishna School. You're a Bal Nivas shelter administrator. When do you get time for yourself?
Well, I mean, I'm not the administrator of the school and Bal Nivas, but what I can tell you, it is quite a full plate, but time for myself is not something I think of too much because I've, for most of my life, dealt with my entire plate filled with things along the motto of action, thy duty, reward not thy concern. So it's not really thinking too much of myself, but always being in service to people.
Hey. And that's a very humble position to take. Minister, you are now the Minister of Human Services and Social Security. I know prior to this government coming back in the political realm as leader of the country, the prior administration had another ministry, I think was Ministry of Community or whatever they call it, I'm not even sure. But can you tell our viewers, Minister, what are some of the areas that you are directly responsible for being the Minister of Human Services and Social Security?
As the name suggests, this is a very human-centered, people-centric ministry. So much of what I do targets people of Guyana, mainly the vulnerable population. So within the ambit of my ministry, I am targeting persons who are extremely vulnerable for various reasons. In that, I'm dealing with people with disabilities, the elderly population, children, women, families, to name a few of those groups that I have within the purview of the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security. So as you can sense, that pretty much covers just about everyone and deals with all of the social issues that are so prevalent in our world and definitely in our country today.
And there's quite a bit, Minister. Just recent of the weekend, we watched with horror what happened in Bartica. You know, the mayor there saying that this guy is, you know, maybe he has psychological problem, but he locked his wife and his 2 children in a home and then set the home on fire. So there's a lot of problems in Guyana, and I think a lot of this responsibility fall on your shoulder. So, Minister, and we have seen also in the Essequibo Coast the other day when this guy killed this young girl. She was underage, they had a relationship. And then there's so many killing going on with men killing their wives or their girlfriend. There is a lot of problems, Minister, in the country. I don't know caused it? What are some of the issues you're finding out the problem is, and what are you working towards solving those problems?
Okay, so you've highlighted violence, and we've just come out of the 16 days of activism that deals with gender-based violence in particular. The first day dealt with the elimination of violence against women and girls. And much like a lot of the world, Guyana has violence as an entrenched culture. We've all seen the instances of violence, some more horrendous than others, but all equally heartbreaking. And for me, every time someone loses their life to violence, it's one person too much. So the ministry has focused intensively on various ways of approaching violence throughout the period. We carried out an intense awareness and education campaign utilizing social media, using the color orange, as this year's theme was called Orange the World. We also came up with our own tagline, Enough with the Violence, because we have had enough. I think everyone has really had enough of the violence that's happening. But you must understand that for us to really surmount the difficulties that come our way with violence, it requires a culture shift, it requires behavioral change, it requires the way in which we socialize young people. What are the messages that we are giving at home? So while we focused a lot on education and awareness and the whole plight of people who are in violent situations, with intense focus on women and girls, we also realized that we had to have intervention. And just a few days ago, the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security launched the 914 hotline. This is a hotline that's dedicated specifically to violence and abuse. So people can call in and make the reports, but we just did not want it to be another hotline. We wanted behind the hotline lots of things to be happening. And this is tied in integrally into what the ministry does. So when someone calls, and if they are in that moment facing a violent situation, we will interface with the police and have a first response team that should go to the person's home to intervene. Following that, we have developed a program called the Survivors Advocacy Program. And what that means is that there is a person who is trained to walk with that person who is in a violent situation through all of the channels that they will require to go, whether it's a medical report, reporting it to the police, or taking it all the way to the court, and of course having access to counseling. But we're taking it further. The ministry recently launched one of many cottage industries to come, which is the Garment and Accessory Cottage Initiative. And this is moving people, women in particular, but not excluding men, and also heavily focusing on women who are in violent situations to have skills and skills training and to be able to find niche markets so that they're financially independent. So the first initiative dealt with making masks to get children back into school. And then inbuilt in every cottage initiative will be a component of training where women are trained in functional literacy, business literacy, micro-enterprise, social issues, and also learning more on the legislation and how the legislation can protect them and what are the avenues that they have for opportunities as well as access to our services. And in addition to all of this, we look forward to rolling out these programs beyond the central location in Georgetown. So decentralizing our services and taking all our services across the region, utilizing a model that we already have, which is the Child Advocacy Center. So it's a one-stop shop where someone who's in a violent situation can have access to all the services that I mentioned. And it was not only focusing within the period on the 914 hotline or the survivors launch, is working closely with men and women. We recently had International Men's Day program, and there we had an opportunity to interface with men across the country and listen to them, how they feel, why they feel pressured, and maybe why some of them move towards violent responses. Coming out of that, we will be creating very early in the new year. In fact, it's ready, but because the holidays are on us, we'll be creating very early in the new year virtual platforms just for men. Because we also don't only need to work with persons who are experiencing violence, but also perpetrators of violence. So this platform will be a safe space for men to unburden, men to get expert advice, and men to share their experiences so that they can move from very volatile, perhaps, situation and work on solutions to help themselves. And I think this approach is necessary because the COVID pandemic has brought with it a number of difficulties, economic hardship, difficulty with employment, high expectations from home. So I think with all of this happening in a home, the home becomes turbulent in that men have to provide. Sometimes they have lost their jobs, and then there's a heavy dependence in some homes on alcohol and substance abuse. So that's another factor. So there are many, many triggers to what we consider violence. And of course, there is no magic wand, there is no magic solution. This will be something that will evolve, something that will progress, but we are taking many steps with the common goal of curbing or eventually eradicating violence. Guyana has just signed on to the Spotlight Initiative, and this is in partnership with the United Nations and the European Union. And through the Spotlight Initiative, a number of things will be looked at, really dealing with violence, as you highlighted, violence, and other issues. And that deals with legislation, policies, economic issues, training, empowering civil society organizations to partner with government to decrease efficiency of systems and also efficacy in what we do. So it's an entire holistic approach to violence, to abuse, and to some of the things that, you know, pretty much fall at the forefront of our social issues.
Minister, what you just said there, you've impressed everyone who is watching this program and who will watch it afterwards. I want to break it down. You're very focused, and I can see that you know exactly what you need to get done. The first thing you mentioned was the cultural shift in our society. That, as you know, will take generation. It's a generational thing to change. Now, is one of your plans to work with the Ministry of Education to start to inculcate in our young people in the school system what the values of the young man, the values of a young woman, you know, what are their responsibility to society as they become older and go into adulthood?
Yes, and I agree with the whole concept of values, because once they are good values, it is pretty much agreed upon at that early outset. When people subscribe to good values, they would develop into adults who are positively contributing, but more or less who understand their role and responsibility wherever they are. And it is necessary for that education or that cultural shift to start from the home. So it's not only working with the boys and the girls, but also the parents. And we've started a family enhancement program through the ministry that's dealing with disruptive youth and their family. So it's not working with any one person alone, it's working with the whole. We're also going to be working to develop more community counselors, as well as working closely with the Ministry of Education within the Spotlight Initiative to work on counseling in schools. So as I said, this is not a quick fix. This is something that needs consistency, this is something that needs structure, and this is something that requires all hands on deck, because it's not only Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, but Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and so many other stakeholders. But what I'm heartened by is the interest that has been demonstrated by civil society organizations, religious organizations, and just people across the country who would like to see this shift. And the ministry has, in the last couple of months, formed a network called the Support and Heal Network. This is getting all the faith-based organizations together. We've just had a successful training on Saturday where we train persons in the ministry and in the faith-based organization, so they will work with communities and deal with all of these social issues. I'm also very soon launching a Young Influencers program, where young people will partner with the ministry and go out there and on social media, in communities, in schools, wherever they are, carry the messages of good value systems, as well as how you can extrapolate yourself from social issues.
Beautiful put, Minister. I think Edith Singh made a very good comment on the screen a minute ago. She said, when boys grow up at home and they see their father abusing, you know, their mothers or their sisters or whoever they're abusing, they themselves become abusers. And as you rightly said, I think it's a holistic view where parents have to be involved with the children and so on. But Minister, it calls for a lot of counselors. Do you have, qualified social workers? And what is your plan and strategy to have adequate, because you need to put them all across the country. I know most of the times everything happens in Georgetown because everything's centered around Georgetown, but we need to have it across the country. What are your plans to train people or send them for training to be that kind of bridge between the family and issues?
So many times on the floor in Parliament, you would have heard me say quite clearly that we need to increase the numbers of caseworkers, social workers, psychologists, specialists, social workers, and specialist psychologists dealing with children in essence, and also those who are geared to work with people with PTSD and all the various specialties that come with trauma. And what I inherited was a serious deficit right across the country as it relates to counselors, social workers, caseworkers. So I plan to work very closely with the University of Guyana. There is a social work program, so I'll be interfacing with the Vice Chancellor and other stakeholders there to see what we can do to move the program not only from basic social work, but perhaps other specialist skill areas. Also, I have spoken to my colleague from the Public Service Ministry, Minister Sonia Parag, and we are talking about scholarships for people in these areas. We also have existing persons in the system, but it's training, retraining, and moving them forward so they understand what needs to be done, and adding on people like the survivors advocates. That's another specialist skill in terms of counseling. But looking at the ministry and how it's structured to really efficiently deliver the mandate of the ministry, it requires reorganization. So that's a big task that we will embark on very early in the new year, looking at the department and shifting it to welfare, probation, and the counseling, so you have all the skill sets that are not only centrally placed, but as I mentioned, decentralizing those skill sets. So it's not something that can happen in a week or a month. It will probably require 1 to 2 years to get it to some semblance of where I want it to be. But the need is great because you're thinking of the hinterland. You're also thinking of very rural areas. But recognizing that, we have a limited fiscal space within the upcoming budget, I am also tapping into the community worker network. This is why we're interfacing with faith-based organizations, civil society organizations, NGOs, because I understand that they not only have a captive network, but they have the capacity to partner with us. And while they may not have specialist skills, at least they can help with intervention at the onset and also community education and awareness. And the intent is to develop safe spaces in partnership with all of these people.
And that's beautiful, Minister, because as you know, in every community across Guyana, there are men and women in villages who are looked up to. And those are the ones you will want, maybe use them to have some formal training to help them to, and also the religious community, as you might rightly said, the pandits and the mulvis and the priests, they can also be part of that team of yours who will reach out to they're the frontline people there. They know what's going on in every home in their village. So, right. And it's such an open society, everyone knows what's going on. And so I think you do have resources. And if you can bring them into your ministry, that's one of my, and I think that's also on your plan and your strategy. So that's good.
Yes, it is. We've already started that kind of work.
Minister, you mentioned alcohol. And I know DDL and Banks DIH are the sellers. Without them, our men don't drink. And I know a lot of women drink too. Have you tapped into the DDL and to Banks DIH to say, listen, we need to partner together. You got to put some money into this program, so we can reach out to the community to. So
I have reached out, and we have gotten a commitment from Banks DIH in particular so far, but we're reaching out to even more than that. We're reaching out to corporate entities across the country to partner with us on all of these areas, whether it's cottage industries. I've engaged GCCI, Private Sector Commission, AmCham, and quite a few of them have expressed interest, and Banks DIH, they have literally jumped on the bandwagon and said that they would like to be part of the 914 promotion, where it encourages women and people and children to call for help. But I think the alcohol thing is very, very persistently entrenched, and it really has caused a lot of damage to families and communities. And it requires people taking maybe a harsh look, a critical look at what's happening in their own families when they consume enormous amounts of alcohol that leads them to the whole point of becoming alcohol abusers. Because, you know, there's social drinking and then there's abuse. So we are hoping later on in the year to convert one of the institutions that falls under the ministry, the Hugo Chavez Center, into what it was initially intended to be, that is a rehab center that will deal with drug rehabilitation, drug meaning any substance, alcohol or drugs, so that we will have residential facilities and also in and out facilities where persons can be counseled, rehabilitated, because it is a problem. And, you know, we can go on and keep saying that it is a problem, but we have to have some level of programming to help persons to kick the habit. And I believe more and more, the messaging needs to be for those who have not yet taken their first drink. You know, maybe don't. Maybe look at what's happening. And if you are already someone who consumes alcohol, start taking steps back to see if you can decrease your intake. I mean, again, it's requiring a cultural shift, it's requiring behavioral change, and it's also, people are free to choose, and literally they're free to drink. But I would like to hope that common sense prevails and you look at the impact of what abuse does and how it could decimate and devastate families when alcohol and drug abuse leads to domestic violence and abuse of children in the home. And if we look at the statistics, and as of last year, most of the cases of domestic violence were associated with alcohol and drug use, mainly alcohol.
And Minister, if you can stay on alcohol a little, and I know you're the president for the Dharmic Sabha, and I'm not bashing Hindus per se, but it appears as though in the Muslim community, I think they bring up in the madrasa, some youths are getting involved in drinking, but a lot of the Muslim community are free of alcohol. The Christian community and the Hindu community seems to be the one who are drinking more. And what I find very worrying, Minister, is that if you go to wedding houses, now it's a new tradition now. You have the bar set up in front of the wedding house, and somebody's selling there without a license. That is illegal as well. What is the ministry doing about that? Because you're selling alcohol to anyone, and in Guyana we have no age limit. Everyone can come and buy it. You don't care a crap who come buy alcohol.
The legislation is clear. There should be no underage. There should be no selling to underage people. The legislation is very, very clear. So it requires enforcement.
Exactly.
And also the licenses are discretionary licenses for ad hoc sale of alcohol. So those are the entities. And let me take off the ministerial hat for a few and wear the Jamaica hat. And I will say that I've written in the past to the police commissioner, the Minister of Home Affairs, GRA, a number of these entities to ask them to, you know, exercise caution when they do this. Because let me wear another hat as a doctor. On the weekends, whenever they have these kinds of things, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in the emergency room, we see the impact of it. People fight, people brawl, and it becomes something that's quite unacceptable and untenable. And as the president of the Guyana Hindu Dharmic Sabha, I've appealed to the Hindu community in particular. Everybody's free to choose and do what they want to do. That weddings are sacred. Weddings are inherently puja. So if you are preparing for your wedding, then you should not have alcohol anywhere around the wedding. What you do after is your business. But at that point in time, you know, it is a sacred and it's an auspicious beginning for the new couple. But as I said, I can only advocate, I can only emphasize, and people can only make choices. And I would like to think that if people are getting married, they want to do so with blessings and with good things. They don't want to have brawls and fights happening. So they should be circumspect in terms of what they bring to their place that they get married. That much I will say to you, but I am not a fan at all of, you know, the people that have bars. I don't think it is something that should happen. And I have not hesitated to say it. And, you know, people come down hard on me and say, well, why do you say that? It is your choice. I am just encouraging and advocating. And through Guyana Hindu Dharmic Sabha, we have encouraged our pundits not to tolerate that. So, I mean, that's as far as we can take it. And we've also advocated temple weddings. But in terms of the other religions, I cannot comment. They all have to decide what they want to do. But I have been in consultation with the CIOG, and they too have said that some of this is creeping into their weddings. So they are happy when, you know, I say these things. And I think, you know, people have to look at not only the social aspect of alcohol consumption, the momentary enjoyment, the momentary, I suppose, relaxing feeling. What happens after? Not everyone can control themselves. Not everyone can go home and go to sleep. Some people get violent, and that's the reality.
Have you considered a tax on alcohol, and that tax goes to your ministry for the purpose of, you know, having some work done?
Well, I think that's a decision for government, and I wouldn't want to comment on that. But I would like to ask people who are in various entities to remember their corporate social responsibility, whether or not it is, you know, they're selling different beverages or whatever, so that they can contribute back to communities and societies and, you know, really, really understand the impact of what's happening with drinking. Younger and younger people are drinking, and I don't think people recognize until it's on them the health impact of consuming, you know, so much alcohol, the damage to their fertility, the damage to their organs, you know, and as I said, it's a culture in our country. It's something people do, so it is required to really effect the kind of change that we want to see. People have to start making conscious decisions. No one can force them. No one can impose what they want on them, but people have to choose of their own. Am I going to take a few drinks and stop, and that makes me a social drinker, or am I going to go beyond that, and then I'm endangering others and myself on the roadways, or I'm going home to create havoc and chaos in my home?
As you said, it's a cultural shift, Minister, and there's a lot on your plate to do. Before we leave this segment, I want to talk about the 914. So what happens when someone calls 914? Who answers? Will it be the same thing like a 911 when they call and nobody answer and nothing happens?
Right. Well, if you remember me saying, I said I want it to be a hotline with a difference. So I don't want it to be that frustrating because we're trying to save lives. Of course, nothing is perfect, and it's just in its infancy. So when someone calls in, there is someone who's trained at the other end to speak with them, because the operator will be trained. Now, it's not only to deal with active cases of violence, or meaning at the moment you are right now something is happening to you. You can be calling for help with counseling. You can call to report someone else in a violent situation. It could be reporting a child who's being abused. It can be a number of reports. Trafficking in persons, which falls under my ministry too. But when someone calls, if it is a case of something happening at the point in time, I've been working very closely with Deputy Commissioner Mr. Hickens, and we have come up with a team of police who our operator will call. They have to respond. It's not us calling a station and nothing happens. We're calling someone very high in the chain of command so that action is taken.
So when someone calls 911, it goes to a switchboard. So if
911, it goes. We have in total it will be 20 operators. So everyone will take a call. Then it can also go remotely to cell phones. So there are a number of different avenues of responding. But the call will be answered immediately because we have people 24 hours behind the phones manning it.
So currently it's in Georgetown, but it's in
Georgetown, but we can react across the country because we'll be in touch with people in the force from across the country.
Well, you plan to do one in Essequibo, one in Linden, one in Berbice.
Well, no, I don't need to do that because this is a toll-free number. Both Digicel and GT&T are on board. So wherever you are calling from, you will be dealt with.
Okay.
So
Okay.
while the hub is central, the response is across the country.
Is it computerized so that you can key in the information, then they put police at Baru, for
Yes,
instance?
that's actually something we are working on because it is necessary. We want to not only extrapolate data, we want to also have networking across the various agencies that are partnering with us on this.
Right, and a log as well. That would be a log to know exactly what's going
Right.
on, and then the response.
Correct.
Minister, I think the president has made a really great choice to have you as the minister. You're well focused, and I think you know exactly what you need to do to get, where we want to be. We will take a break now, Minister. When we come back, I want to address suicide, and I hope by then Dr. Rose will be on with us because he was stuck in traffic here in New York. So we'll be back shortly.
Travelspan has low fares on American Airlines, Eastern Airlines, Caribbean Airlines, and JetBlue. Let Travelspan shop and compare prices for all 4 airlines. Guyanese now have choices, so book your preferred airline through Travelspan. Call Travelspan at 718-845-0437 for the lowest deals between New York, Miami, and Guyana. That's Travelspan at 718-845-0437. From Miami to Guyana, rates are as low as $186 one-way and $417 round-trip. Deals from New York to Guyana are as low as $191 one-way and $475 round-trip. And Travelspan is also offering shop and ship. So if you cannot travel, you shop and Travelspan will ship all your items for you. So call Travelspan today in New York at 718-845-0437. In Georgetown, 227-1701. In Berbice, 337-4287. And in the West Coast Demerara, 269-0140. Travelspan has several offices to serve all your needs, so call Travelspan today. All From One Supplier is pleased to announce its online shipping for West Indian and American groceries. Order online at allfromonesupplier.com and with free shipping and deliveries to any part of the United States. Save time and energy to shop for all of your West Indian groceries from the safety of your home or office. We carry West Indian products like curry powders, meats and fish, dashing bush, pepper sauce, sodas, and your favorite snacks. All From One Supplier has it all. All From One Supplier fulfills and ships your order directly to you. So visit All From One Supplier today to start shopping. Or call All From One Supplier at 718-551-3292 to handle all of your West Indian grocery needs. That's All From One Supplier, 718-551-3292. Free shipping, free deliveries, or curbside pickup from allfromonesupplier.com. Logistics International, based in Trinidad with representatives in Guyana, is pleased to announce its shipping services from Trinidad to Guyana. Logistics provides shipping services and has experienced personnel to handle all of your shipping needs from Trinidad to Guyana. Buy in Trinidad and let Logistics handle all of your shipping to Guyana from small boxes to container sizes. Call Logistics in Trinidad at 1-868-336-8218 to handle all of your shipping needs, and they handle all sizes. Logistics International has been shipping for over 22 years to many Caribbean countries with reliability and dependability. Call 1-868-336-8218 in Trinidad. That's 1-868-336-8218. Or email at liclcargo@gmail.com.
Welcome back to our viewers, and we are expecting Dr. Rose anytime now to join us, and we want to thank the Honorable Minister of Human Services and Social Security, Dr. Vindhya Persaud. Minister, thank you again for staying on with us. In the first segment, we spoke a lot about the evils of our society, and there's a lot of evil. And I think you have a good grasp of what is to be done, but as you said, it will take a seismic shift, a cultural shift, which takes time. Working with everyone in the community, everyone who is willing to hopefully we can transform our society as we become an oil-producing nation. Minister, Berbice, but more specifically, I think Blackbush Polder is considered the suicide capital of the world. Essequibo also have a substantial problem with suicide. There are complaints that most of the resources to combat this problem is within the Georgetown Region 4 area. Is this really so, and what are your plans to address frontally if it's under your ministry? I know this might straddle different ministries.
Yeah, I didn't know.
To confront this illness of suicide, because it is an illness, I believe.
Yeah, in fact, suicide has dogged Guyana for a number of years, and I believe that suicide is something, again, that requires behavioral change, cultural movement, and also intervention from a national level. It is not something that any one person or entity or even government alone can tackle. And we have seen us go to the top of the list, then drop to number 2, and we've seen movement from one region to another, first region 6 and then region 2. And it comes back to why people opt to take their life, why they see it as an out, and what support structures we have in place to help them to deal with whatever vicissitudes and challenges they're dealing with in their life. And it can be varied. It can be persons dealing with economic disadvantage, other persons dealing with dysfunctional relationships, which is a common one, family instability, and many young people see it as a way out because I think at home there is no support. I have actually spoken to many young people over the years, both from my medical profession, also from a dharmic perspective, also from working in the fields in social work and doing what I do. And many times you hear the same thing: we have no one to speak to, or we are being judged harshly. And then with the advent of technology and the introduction of social media and cyberbullying, that brought with it a whole other challenge, because now it's not only in-person types of issues that people have to deal with, that perhaps whatever it is overwhelms them to such an extent they can't cope with it, they can't cope with the pressures, and they implode. And one of the ways is to take their life. And so it comes back to the support network that has to expand beyond any ministry and beyond any government in the community, starting with at home. People need to start speaking at home. When you speak to a lot of young people, when you speak to a lot of people in general, many people actually do not have effective communication and dialogue at home. And sometimes if someone gets into trouble or makes a different choice or takes a different path, they're judged heavily, they're ostracized, they're marginalized. Sometimes they're even put out of their homes and they're left to fend for themselves. And when you think of a young person who has a fertile mind, but they are also, I would say, unformed because their experience is not there, throwing them out to the wolves is a very tough one. And, you know, pressure is something you have to live up to a certain level of expectation. So it's, I believe, this whole coping mechanism needs to be strengthened, and we have to start with it from the homes, the schools, and widen it to the community. So it's not only education, it's also when someone finds themselves in a jam, who do they turn to for help? And that help has to be forthcoming. And then there's also trust issues in terms of, if you unburden, if you share whatever is bothering you, is it confidential? Can that person effectively help you? So there's a lot of things, which means strengthening social safety nets too. And that's a big task that the ministry is taking on. But suicide is dealt with both by this ministry and Ministry of Health, because it's a public health issue. And it's also one that requires counseling and social support, which is where our ministry comes in.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Minister Persaud is waiting for you all the time.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Persaud. How are you? I'm sorry I'm late today.
Thank you. I'm well, thank you.
I get caught up in traffic, but that's a different story.
I went to Albany to count the electoral college for New York for President-elect Biden, so he was stuck.
Okay.
All right, Doc, Minister, before bringing Dr. Rose, suicide, as we get back to take off the ministerial hat now, let's put on the religious hat. It seems, I know all over the world there's suicide, right? It's not exclusive to Guyana alone. But what we found in Guyana is that most of the Indians, most suicide is committed by people of Indian origin. And most of these Indians are of Hindu origin as well.
Well, I want to say before you go any further, Hinduism does not advocate suicide. In fact, you should not, because life is considered very valuable as a Hindu, and you should consider yourself blessed and privileged to even be alive. So it's not something that is advocated by the Hindu religion, and in fact, Hinduism speaks out vehemently against that kind of thing. So it just is fortunate that the statistics show what they do, but it's not something that the religion actually promotes.
No, I'm not saying promote it. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that I believe because of karma that is embedded in the belief of Hinduism, we should tell our young people that, listen, guys, if you're going through some problems, that is part of what you have to go through in life based on your karmic debt. So go through it with joy, knowing that it will end not long from now. Do not commit suicide, because if you commit suicide, you're not getting away from what you have to reap again. In a future life, you will have to come back and reap exactly that. I mean, that is the essence of Hinduism. So if our pundits can tell our, the members of the congregation, if you do this, you're not escaping, you're creating more wars for yourself. In that context, I'm talking about, not propagating it.
Well, I have to say that through Ghana Hindu Dharmic Sabha, we've been training our pundits to counsel and to also address it when they give their sermons and kathas in the mandirs. But you see, aside from that, that is one element of it. But aside from that, as I mentioned, the support structure needs to be there. So it starts from in the home. If young people have a problem and when they get home, they can't, without fear, divulge whatever it is that is bothering with them. They can't have an open and frank conversation with their peers. They're not sure that they will get the help and the support that they need. Sometimes they go outside of the home and they either don't get anything, and this is not only young people, this is people in general who have committed suicide. It's that support that they don't have. They feel that there is no one there for them. And sometimes society should not sometimes, all the time, they should not stigmatize, nor should they discriminate, nor should society be so judgmental that people are afraid of whatever it is they're facing. And sometimes a lot of people suffer from depression that is underdiagnosed and they're not being treated for it. And you see quite a big link between depression and suicide. Yeah. And if you ask me why it goes in a particular direction with ethnicity and religion, that's not something that I can answer easily to say, well, why? But what I will say that maybe in those homes, you need to be more adjustment.
And Minister, before Dr. Rose come on, can someone who has suicidal tendency call the 914 number and get some help as well?
Yes, absolutely. They can call the 914 for that. There's also a suicide hotline, but you can call the 914. I mean, the point of 914 is not to turn anyone away, not to frustrate anyone, and not to say to anyone, well, because it's not violence or because it's not abuse, we're not helping you. We will help.
Okay. Dr. Rose?
Good evening, Dr. Vindhya Persaud. How are you today? Now,
I'm good, thank you.
Good. My question to you is this. I don't know if my colleague touched on domestic violence as yet.
Yes, extensively.
Okay, you touched on that. But then let me go to something else. Pensioners, they'll be getting an increase in January. But what about public assistance for poor single mothers? I think it's pegged now at $18. If you have 3 children, 4, 5, 6, it's still $18.
Right. So public assistance is something that we also want to increase, and I will be pushing for that in the new budget. You're right, pension will increase from January. It's $9,000 for public assistance, and it's per child. There is no difference in how much you get, whether or not you have 1, 2, or 3 children, but it's the same value per child. But the thing about it, if we look at public assistance, it's not only for single mothers. Public assistance is given for people who have disabilities, people who have medical conditions, people who are single parents and have children. It's given in cases where children would have lost their parents, one or both. It's also given in cases where people have fallen on difficult circumstances. So public assistance covers a wide range. And to determine who gets, there is the Poor Law Commission and the local Board of Guardians. That's part of the process. These have recently been commissioned. So one of the things that we're doing, and it's something I feel very strongly about, there's a list of persons. We have provision for 14,000 persons to benefit from public assistance. It was increased in the last quarter from 12,000 persons to 14,000 persons. But number of persons, other than those who are permanently disabled or have chronic conditions that require that public assistance, there are a number of persons, I believe, that can come off the public assistance list. And they can benefit from training, and they can benefit from jobs. So that will be the focus too. So we will look at that list objectively, and those persons we think can benefit from training programs and getting jobs to help themselves. We will be moving in that direction too.
Dr. Persaud, I heard you said that it's $9,000 per child. So if you have 4 children, you're supposed to get $36,000?
Yes, I think there's a cutoff depending on the circumstance, but might be not all the children get, but you have a percentage of those who get. It is something that I know should go to everyone and every child, but realistically, we don't have the budget for it.
Okay, I know a personal case. Someone has 4 children, and they told her the cutoff point was $18,000, and that's all she has been receiving.
How old are the children? The eldest are like...
The eldest is about 11, 10, 8, and 5.
Okay. But cases like that, now with the Poor Law Commission in and the boards of guardians, cases like that could be looked at, again, reviewed, and recommendations can be made. Remember, these are now appointed. I am now here. So it's also looking at policy, and all of these things will be reviewed. The legislation is archaic as well. It's from 1903. So it's looking at the legislation, the policies, and what we can realistically do within the fiscal space to ensure that we can provide for all the people who need help. And I mean, I do know realistically many people need help. Sometimes it's a judgment call, but now that we have the boards in place, all of these things, like in the case of what you raised, could be looked at.
Okay. Now,
Doc,
go ahead.
You have Mr. Vishnu Mahadev on call. He wants to ask Dr. Vindhya a question. Can he come on?
Sure, yeah. Go ahead.
Go on, Vishnu Mahadev.
Yes, sir. I thank you again very much for the opportunity.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I am hearing the doctor speaking, but I would like to talk to the doctor about some of our policies that we discussed.
Go on, you're on, go on.
Okay, yes. I actually, yes, I would like to continue the conversation that I had with the doctor in Guyana about her policies.
In regards
to what policies?
Well, we were talking of doing some social program to mimic those that we are enjoying here in the United States, especially for the underprivileged and the seniors in Guyana.
Okay, thanks, Vish. Minister will answer the question. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you for the comment and question. Well, there are a number of programs that we'll be rolling out next year, but we also have to be conscious of the framework within which I can effect those programs. As I mentioned, legislations and policies will have to be amended, some repealed and reviewed. So all of that requires us going to Parliament to make them modern. Many of these things are outdated. So it's not only looking at the programs, but it's also looking at the policies and legislations as they exist to make them move into the modern era. And also look at the needs that the modern era has brought with it when it comes to the elderly and the underprivileged. I have always believed that we should not only get into the habit of doing handouts alone, we should always engage people so that they can be developed to a point where they can actually work and they can actually contribute and they can actually earn. Because I believe if there's financial independence, many of the issues that they face, they can, with that kind of a help, move a little bit further out of those issues. As I mentioned, these are not things that are quick fixes. These are things that have been there for a long time. So every step that we take in the direction towards the ideal is a good step. But it's moving to that point where there are more programs, more initiatives, and more avenues for support and for training for all of these people who are underprivileged. As you know, the unemployment rate in Guyana would have skyrocketed and would have really escalated, especially within the last few months because of COVID and the election crisis. So people are now in waters that perhaps they have not been in for a long time because of the impact on the economy. And of course, disposable income is not what it used to be, and people are just completely without jobs. So it's an enormous task, and it's not only something that can be dealt with by this ministry. All the sectors now have to look at creating jobs, new industries, and the ministry will be working from next year. You'll see, in addition to the garment and accessory cottage industry initiative, more industries, more initiatives specifically targeting single parents, people in violent situations, and also the underprivileged, school dropouts, because we understand that it's not only providing for them in the short term, it's equipping them to face life in the long term.
Dr. Persaud, coming back to public assistance, is there a social department where someone from the quarantine or from LETEM could apply in their very areas or regions, or they have to come to Georgetown?
Well, what exists is what I don't like, and if you missed the initial thing, and I said what I plan to do is to decentralize the services offered, because while there are boards of guardians across the region and all, including the hinterland, where they can access public assistance and all of that, all of the services are not in all of the areas across the country. So a big part of what we want to do is to decentralize those services so that people don't have to come to Georgetown. We're also going to use the online options for all the forms and processing as much as possible for those who can access the internet. Now, in some areas you can't, so we actually have officers in all of the regions who make these things available to people, but you have to expand it. It's not enough. It's not enough by a long shot.
I know you just took over that ministry, but you know there's an addiction problem in Guyana, especially drugs. The United Nations, the World Health Organization reported that at least about 11 to 13% of the youths in Guyana are actually addicted to some form of substance. What plans you have to get these people counseling? Are you going to set up centers across, because it's not only in Georgetown, it's in every region it's happening, especially also in the Amerindians area.
Right. So again, like many of the social issues, this is an entrenched culture. And you are right, it is across the country, and we need to work across the country. So as I would have said earlier, we're working with the faith-based organizations, civil service organizations, tapping into where we can complement each other with work in terms of counseling and reaching out. And also the Hugo Chavez Center, that's in Region 5, that will be repurposed for drug rehabilitation. So you will have a residential facility and also a place where people can go in and out and get help. I'm also speaking with the Attorney General so that we can work on where the legislation plays a role and how we can move, people who are offenders and perhaps using small quantities, how we can work on community. There are lots of plans to look at the drugs issue, but it's something that is, I believe, that is beyond a year or two. This is something that has to be ongoing. This is something that requires training of persons to deal with the specifics of drug addiction, because as you know too, it's not only regular counseling. To get people rehabilitated requires much more than that. much more than that. And then you end up with withdrawal, and then they can go right back onto it if access is there. So it's not only dealing with the counseling aspect and the intervention, it is also dealing with prevention and also dealing with access to drugs. So it's quite a huge problem that will not only be addressed by this ministry, but quite a few other ministries.
I don't know if my colleague addressed this issue. Back to domestic violence. It is women, especially poor, are the brunt of domestic violence. And studies have shown it's because men in general, not only in Guyana, are highly insecure of their spouses. If the phone call comes through on the cell phone, they want to know it's who and everything else. Now, in other words, a lot of these men, this can be aborted if there are counseling offered to these men in advance in different regions. Is your government has a program to extend counseling to men who will most likely commit domestic violence?
Yes. So I did mention that within the short span I was here, we held something for International Men's Day. And it was a novel idea in that we got men from across the country to speak on all of these things: drug abuse, domestic violence, relationships, fatherhood, what it means to be a good man, what it means to have someone have lots of expectations, how do you deal with volatile situations, anger management, you name it, they spoke on it. Coming out of that, because of the COVID pandemic, I decided to have what we call a virtual platform. I'm calling it a virtual hangout. So come January, every Friday evening from 8 o'clock, men can enter a safe space, which is their virtual hangout, and all of these issues will be ventilated by them from men to men. So men among their peers. There will be a panel of experts, which includes counselors that will deal with issues in that group situation, but also be available to the men should they need one-on-one therapy or counseling. Once we can, we will try to do these sessions in person, but we're very conscious of the COVID pandemic and the limitations that it's brought on us. But this will be an ongoing thing, because coming back to what we do, we speak of women's empowerment, but the conversation sometimes does not include men, and men say, so what about us? So we are trying to create the empowered woman, but the gentleman does not understand the empowered woman. She says yes, he says no. He says yes, she says no. It's a long history of men and women perhaps not understanding each other in the way in which they need to do. But in our momentum to take women to that point where we have equality, which is an SDG, we want to also include the men. And that's why I'm very, very much persistent when it comes to having initiatives to include men. They can have their say, they can have their space, they should also have therapy and counseling. And at some point in that conversation, bringing women and men together so they start to understand each other, because the conversation cannot be in isolation. And that's what happens. Women have their forum, men may or may not have their say and their forum, but we need to have that platform where they actually interface with each other, and that's when maybe a volcano will erupt, who knows? But they need to have that point where they interface. And we have that thing where people now say, you know what, you are going out, you're working, you may have colleagues at work, but when you come home, you may be earning more than me. How do I deal with it? And vice versa. So it's a lot of changing, a lot of behavioral change that's involved there.
Okay, a quick question for you here, and this is like putting you on the spot, but I know you're capable of answering questions.
Goodness.
Now, you have, and most people don't know this, one of the largest ministries in Guyana, Ministry of Social Affairs. Can you tell our listeners, Guyanese at home and abroad, what your portfolio entails, so that they can know where to go for help?
All right, so this is the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security. So there are three areas. The two main areas would be social services. Social services includes anything to do with the elderly, whether it's pension or any elder-related matter. It also has to do with families. So if families are in difficult circumstances, they can come to us for help. It also deals with persons with disabilities, so we also provide for them. It also deals with persons who have social issues, like we mentioned, violence, abuse, and all of this. So the hotline is where they can call for any or all of these services. They can also visit the Cornhill location where the social services unit is based. They can also access our programs. We have a website, we have a Facebook, and I'm very soon launching a virtual desk on Facebook. I am also seeing what comes in on the inbox. So we have persons responding to people, because I understand that all of these groups that I mentioned, the disadvantaged, the underprivileged, the differently abled, or the people with disabilities, the elderly, the women, again, a big group that I deal with. But I don't only like to single out women, I say men too, because I don't want them to feel left out. So everybody. And then on the children's side, the Child Protection Agency deals with all the children and all the issues across Guyana. So it's that extensive.
Okay. Over to you, Charles.
All right, Minister, when we come back, we will continue this conversation. As I said, you've been so eloquent in your response, and I believe, and I know with full confidence that you know exactly what needs to be done in your ministry for the benefit of all Guyanese. So we'll be back shortly.
All From One Supplier is pleased to announce its online shipping for West Indian and American groceries. Order online at allfromonesupplier.com and with free shipping and deliveries to any part of the United States. Save time and energy to shop for all of your West Indian groceries from the safety of your home or office. We carry West Indian products like curry powders, meats and fish, dashing bush, pepper sauce, sodas, and your favorite snacks. All From One Supplier has it all. All From One Supplier fulfills and ships your order directly to you. So visit All From One Supplier today to start shopping, or call All From One Supplier at 718-551-3292 to handle all of your West Indian grocery needs. That's All From One Supplier, 718-551-3292. Free shipping, free deliveries, or curbside pickup from allfromonesupplier.com. Travelspan has low fares on American Airlines, Eastern Airlines, Caribbean Airlines, and JetBlue. Let Travelspan shop and compare prices for all 4 airlines. Guyanese now have choices, so book your preferred airline through Travelspan. Call Travelspan at 718-845-0437 for the lowest deals between New York, Miami, and Guyana. That's Travelspan at 718-845-0437. From Miami to Guyana, rates are as low as $186 one-way and $417 round-trip. Deals from New York to Guyana are as low as $191 one-way and $475 round-trip. And Travelspan is also offering shop and ship. So if you cannot travel, you shop and Travelspan will ship all your items for you. So call Travelspan today in New York at 718-845-0437. In Georgetown, 227-1701. In Berbice, 337-4287. And in the West Coast Demerara, 269-0140. Travelspan has several offices to serve all your needs. So call Travelspan today.
Okay, welcome back to tonight's program. We're having the Honorable Minister of Human Services and Social Security, Dr. Vindhya Persaud. Doc, the COVID problem, of course, it's international, but Guyana is one of the few countries whose airport is open. So I want to invite all of you traveling home for Christmas. Flights are the cheapest you have ever had for generations. So call Travelspan and you will be able to get some cheap tickets. But Doc, the religious leaders in our country, they're some of the prime culprits, if I can use that term, not to have some, pay emphasis on this problem because they go to weddings, they go to, funerals, they go and have the large gathering. And a lot of times without the mask and all the things that the Ministry of Health is asking them to do. What will you tell our religious leaders that they should do and act responsible to ensure that this virus is contained?
Well, I will say that the virus takes lives, and religious leaders, like anybody else, should be concerned if any person is at the risk of losing his or her life. So I believe that if someone is a religious leader, they want to have preservation of life. They want people to enjoy life and a good quality of life. So it starts with them leading by example. It's not only telling people to wear a mask or to socially distance, it's you doing it. Because if you say one thing and you do something else, then your words are not in consonance with your actions. So it starts from you, the religious leader, to lead by example and to take responsibility if you are convening or you are part of any religious gathering to ensure that you adhere to the COVID guidelines, because too many people are becoming exposed, and once they're exposed, they're at the risk of developing severe symptoms. Of course, there are many presentations, but once you develop severe symptoms, there's no guarantee that you're not going to lose your life. So it's that serious. So I want to appeal to all of them, and taking off this hat, I don't know which hat I'm wearing right now, there's so many hats, but from the dharmic perspective hat, we have given clear guidelines to all of the persons within the dharmic organization, the religious leaders in particular, to ensure that all the temples have masks and sanitizers. We even had for Navratri, which, as you know, is a very big thing in Guyana, we even had a seating chart developed so that the mandirs followed it. So they maintained the distance in the mandirs. They staggered the numbers of persons going over the night so that it wasn't full at any point in time. And lots of temples have not been having the regular services as we know it. They have been waiting on various occasions, or they have been doing it that way. So, I mean, if people want, they can take, a page out of Dharmic and do it that way. But essentially, COVID is not something that an entity can deal with. The responsibility comes down to every one of us. Every one of us. We are responsible for wearing our mask. People can only tell us, and it can only be mandatory in a country, but you have to put it on. And you have to understand what putting on a mask means. You're protecting yourself and others. And distancing. In fact, until the vaccine is available to everybody across the world, everybody is at risk. And no one should consider another person safe, because you truly don't know, because so many asymptomatic people are walking around out there and they have COVID. So we don't know. And also COVID affects people differently. You may have no symptoms, you may have mild, moderate symptoms, or you may be severely affected. And I don't think anybody wants to lose their life, or any family would like to lose anyone. So, inherently comes back to our sense of responsibility. And if we are responsible people, then we should do the right thing.
Beautifully put, Minister. As you said, I think the mandirs, the churches, the mosques, they have good protocols for the, gathering. But the biggest culprits are the people's home. And again, the pandits go to the home, the mulvis go to the home, the priests go to the home, and they have all this gathering, and they're not social distancing and all these things. And that is something that you really need to talk to the religious leaders about, and they need to stop that.
I think it's the religious leaders, yes, but it's also people, because we are our own keepers in a lot of ways. And we know, if you are told not to have large gatherings in public, then it's implied that you shouldn't have large gatherings at home either. So you need to practice the same thing at home or in public. And it's not that it's something that you want to escape from because someone's imposing it on you. It's for your own benefit. It's for your own health. So when you are at home, maintain the protocols just as much as if you're at work or if you're out there. People tend to think this thing is not as serious as it is until it hits them or it hits someone close to them. And sometimes I wonder what it would take. When I see the escalation of numbers of cases, and I also see with that in tandem the numbers of deaths, and you ask yourself, what would it take? For me, I believe it's worrisome, it's frightening. You can use a number of adjectives, but it all comes back down to, what do we want? Do we want to enjoy life, Or do we want to always live in fear because we don't know if we're exposed or we're at risk? If you take all the precautions, 90% of the time you're okay. But if you don't take the precautions, then you're wide open. And when you don't take the precautions and you go home to your families, especially if they're elderly persons or people who have other illnesses or any illness, especially if it's immunosuppressant type illnesses, then you are really exposing them. So it's a level of selfishness too, because I'm sure many homes have people who have those issues.
Yeah, and you put it well, Minister, and I hope people take responsibility. It's everyone have to carry their own responsibility. And as I said, with our gathering at a home, you can't blame the religious leaders for coming there and do his or her work, but at least the people at home should at least, observe the protocols that the ministry has put out. Before I ask Dr. Rose to come in, Doc, I know, come back to suicide. A lot of suicide, as one of our colleague, Leland, asked the question. A lot of suicide happen by drinking gramaxone or, all these things that affect plant, kill plants. For those who sell those products, are they trained to observe the buyers, for instance, to know if they have any indication? Are they going to use it for crop, for the crops, or are they likely to use it for themselves?
Well, it's a good question. And years ago in Blackbush Folder, that used to be a problem. So there was a system developed, I think, by then Minister Dr. Ramsamy, if I remember correctly, where people had to store these things carefully. They had a double lock system. They had to have special permission to even purchase it. But I don't think any of that obtains right now, and it's getting all those things back into the system because, things are just sold ad hoc. People store it anyway. Sometimes children end up utilizing those things and people grab it if they're in anger and things get out of control. So it's putting all of those mechanisms back in place because that had created havoc in Blackbush Fold in particular, but not exclusively. And that program that was embarked upon when he was a minister, I think, was relatively successful.
Thank you, Doc.
Yes, Minister, as you can see, I'm fighting for the underdogs in Guyana, and they are women. Now, as most of us know, women are not being paid equally. I don't know if this comes under you or you can advocate on their behalf.
I am a firm believer in that because I happen to fall in that gender space. I am a woman, and I will not only stop at being paid equally, I think equal opportunity. So it's never something that I will stop pushing. I feel we need to have equal opportunity, equal space, equal pay. And the whole 50-50 movement. But I don't think it is something that women alone should have to push. I think it should be an understanding that we are a world that should have equality when it comes to men and women, because why are we any different? In fact, if we are to ask a woman randomly, she'll tell you that she does way more than a man does, because not only is she out there providing for her family, she's taking care of her family. I know some men will say they do that too, but if we look historically at the presence of women and the impact they have had in their homes and families, you would have seen not only what they have provided, not only what they have gone out and worked, but they have raised and educated families, and you ask yourself how. So I think the time has come not to fight for it anymore, but to let others, and I mean the men, you all have to join this campaign with us and to say that it is not something that we need to fight. You're ready to give us our space. You're ready to hear us. We shouldn't have to shout and shout harder to be heard. And you're ready to say, if we work fit, then we should be paid equal and straight with you. I don't think this is something that we are asking for, that it should be a favor, because many women who are fighting for equal pay are probably doing as much work or more work. If you look at the upward mobility of women, they have to work harder to compete with their male counterparts, because there has always been a boys' club somewhat. It's still a patriarchal world that we live in. So the conversation, the fight, the dialogue will be never ending. And I think women like me, women in this country and beyond this country, will never stop fighting until we have that equal say, equal space, equal opportunity, and yes, equal pay.
Okay. Now, domestic servants, the vast majority are women.
Mm-hmm.
and there are no minimum wage for that. Those who employ domestic servants pay them next to nothing because they know that these women are looking for a job. They're not qualified to get other jobs elsewhere. And they pay them like maybe $10,000, $8,000 a week and working them for 6 days, sometimes 7 days per week. Are you prepared to establish a minimum wage for domestic servants?
I think the Ministry of Labor is looking at that. We have a minimum wage that is in the public sector. That conversation has already been started in the private sector. And it's something that needs to be looked at. Also, not only the minimum wage, paying of NIS and all of these things. So it's more than just that. But I believe the conversation, it really falls within the ambit of the Ministry of Labor. But I believe it is something that they will look at. And you are right. Women tend to fall in the areas where, because they so badly need jobs, they're taken on, and because they are desperately in need of those jobs, they accept it, whether it's in the security service as guards, or in the domestic arena, or as salespersons in stores. And it is sad because if you look at the workforce, while more women can be in the workforce, those who are in the workforce are not adequately compensated.
Okay, I'm looking at another issue here again. This statistics might not be up to date, but I'm almost sure it's around that number.
Tell me.
Last year, there have been almost 900 children taken away from their parents, mostly mothers. What is the worst case scenario for a child to be taken from that mom?
This means through the Child Protection Agency?
Yes.
Okay. So children are removed for various reasons. You might be surprised, but many of the children are removed from their home because of abuse, sometimes incest, many times, you might not believe it, because of substance abuse, and sometimes because of neglect. Rarely because of poverty. Usually what happens is the Child Care and Protection Agency will work with that mother. The children might be temporarily removed if the mother and father cannot provide for them. They might be 5, 6, 7 siblings. We've had cases with children on the road, living under a shed, all kinds of things. So to ensure that they're in safety, because when they're out there like that, they are fair game for people to prey on them, and then people can take advantage of them. So it's moving them temporarily into safe spaces until their mothers or foster care or adoption or integration back into the family can happen. And usually many children are left in preference with their mothers. It is because of some major reason that they might be removed. But however, I take your point that many cases too need to be reviewed to ensure that sometimes children are not removed when they should not be. And one of the things we are looking at very seriously is institutionalization of children in general, because we believe children belong in homes, preferably with their parents, their mothers and their fathers, or their mothers or their fathers. But because of what is going on out there, that happens sometimes. And I have been speaking, my office is a place where women come, they break down, they cry. And once I am convinced that the child has been removed and it's not the right decision, I will engage the head of the Child Care and Protection Agency and we see where it goes. But lots of times the court is involved. There's a family court. So once that decision is made, we cannot intervene. But it's also pushing our officers to make sure they investigate thoroughly and properly. That's why we will have ongoing training so that they make the right decision and they give the right reports so that children are not removed when they shouldn't be. But we also have an issue right now, and this is something that people are very divided on. There are lots of children coming on the streets. And, I think we need to hold the parents accountable, because you would think they're on the streets because they don't have a home. Not true. So very soon we will be giving a report on the situation as it relates to children on the street and why they're on the street and what the situation is at home. So the soft touch approach, which we are taking right now, is to reach out to the parents and see why they're on the road, engage them, try to get them back home and that kind of thing.
Now, I'll give you some alarming statistics. they are almost 50% of single mothers in Guyana. In other words, 50% of the population is married, 50% are not married, single mothers in Guyana. And in a number of cases, these mothers will send the kids to the primary school close to their homes. But if these kids should write common entrance exam or whatever they have to write, and they get placing to a school, let's say from the country party to Georgetown, they can't afford to find that passage, transportation costs to pay for the kid to go, so the kid will not go to high school.
It's true. It's true. And that's been going on for a long time, or they make a decision to send one and not the other.
Right.
And it really breaks my heart, especially when the child has excelled and they can't go to, any of the well-known schools. But I think there is a movement from the Ministry of Education to work on making the schools better across the country. Again, that's not a quick fix. So that when a child goes to any school, even if within their community, the quality of education delivered is one comparable. It's an idealistic situation. It might not become reality in a year or two, but I think that's where we're working to. But I take your point. It is a problem that the child is deprived of an opportunity because of poverty. It is true. But while people are out there and they're having a family, it is a real struggle. I see it. I see it all the time, because many times the parents will come to the ministry and they need help for a tablet for their child to go to school. Because it's COVID, they need to link up. They come because they need food. So it's quite something. And I don't think Guyana is alone with the economic impact of COVID-19 at all.
I am from the Marxist school of thought, always fighting for the poor. Now, in Guyana itself, there are a number of kids who have actually dropped out of school, high school or elementary school. I know this is a matter for the Ministry of Education, but in most cases, these kids turn to crime. What plans the government have to get these kids ahead or before they turn to crimes? Especially young boys. Some girls turn to prostitution.
Right. Well, it's trying to find them before they get into that situation, or if they get into that situation, hopefully we can move them into avenues where they can be influenced differently. And there are a number of programs. You have the technical vocational school, they have the Board of Industrial Training, and you have some of these where if they drop out, they can have access to alternative modes of education. But it is also convincing that youngster, male or female, once they have decided to take a particular direction in life, to get back on track with education. Right now, we have, as I would have mentioned earlier, the Family Enhancement Program. This is working with disruptive youth. We have piloted this program in Region 4, and it also has some impact in Region 3. But this is a program we're going to expand across the country over the next 2 to 3 years. What this means is people who have disruptive young people, they might be school dropouts, they might be getting in trouble with the law, they might be, difficult, let's say difficult young people for one reason or another. We have a team at the ministry, the Family Enhancement Services, that works with the young person and the family. And this would involve them getting back into school if necessary, or them going in a direction where they can gain education. We have also partnered with the UNFPA, and we're working with, I know you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to tell you, pregnant teenagers to try and get them an education. So we are tackling this thing on many, many fronts. But you will agree with me, this is not something that can be easily dealt with in a few months or even a year, because there's so many cases of this. And the reality too is a lot of young men would like this quick money. And if you look at the statistics of the university, more women are graduating than men, because they're not taking that next step up to tertiary education, not because it doesn't exist, but because they might find other means. But in the ministry, I've actually been speaking to a few people to see if we can come up with simple industries for young men, especially those difficult, or maybe those who are challenged in one way or another, where we can gainfully employ them. So rather than turning to a life of crime, they have employment that they can have a ready income, and we try to train them as well. But these will be pilot programs, and we will keep tweaking until we get to the right formula. Mentoring is also another part. So we are developing mentorship programs within the ministry, and we also have some of those in other areas as well. The Child Protection Agency, for example, has a mentorship program that's working in that direction.
A good question for you here. School vouchers for uniforms and so forth. In the PP manifesto, they said they will double it, which they did. But you know what's wrong with that doubling? When the PP was in office, it was 4,000. After reduced it to 2. So the PP doubled it back to 2. They should double it from their time from 4 to 8.
Well, if you look at the budget right now, we only had a budget for the last quarter of the month. So you have to look at the fiscal space, and you have to look at the time in which we had to deliver. So the new budget is coming. So I'll just tell you, let's see what happens. But every minister, and I know this because this includes me, every minister will fight for their turf and fight for all the things you want to see happen, because we're all passionate about people, about helping people. But at the end of the day, we have to look at what is the reality as it exists with what we can do realistically financially. And we have to look at what the fiscal space provides and where we go, which is priority. But it does not mean that within 5 years that we have, you will not see significant strides. But we have just gotten in here. And if people look at what we would have done in the last few months, you would see that every sector is hopping. And I use that word in the sense that, everybody is out there, they're doing their best, and they're getting things done. And they're getting things done rather quickly. Some things can be fixed, some things can be addressed within a short term, but others need a longer term to address it.
Enlist me to fight for the poor and for children.
Please come and work with me if you want to. It's a free.
I will. Now there's a question here. Also in the PP manifesto, they said they will grant $15,000 to each child, to parents for each child they have.
Say again? I didn't hear that. They will grant what?
$15,000. Then before leaving office, they were giving parents $10,000 per child per year. Now they said they increase it to $15,000. When this will start?
No, you're looking, as I said, you looked at us in just this last budget. This is not a year's budget. So again, we couldn't budget things. We're giving $25,000 cash relief. We're doing so many other things. So what we had to look at is what we could have achieved before the next budget. So I think you have to wait and see what happens with the new budget. And I can tell you that we will be addressing many, many things in the manifesto, if not in the next budget, in the following one, because we have made promises to people and we intend to keep those promises. So some things you would see roll out now, some things you would see roll out in the next budget, because we also have to look at how fast we can implement these things. We can't just do everything all at once, because you're looking at many different resources.
Now, one last question, and I think this comes under your ministry. Gays and lesbians are not being treated fairly in Guyana and in most parts of the Caribbean. How will your ministry address this issue?
Well, we have an act a piece of legislation that is telling us that we should not discriminate against anyone, and that's my personal view. So we are not discriminating. They can have access to all the services that are open to anyone in Guyana, and I think you would not see anyone who is gay or lesbian or transsexual, whatever, you will not see them be turned away from accessing any of the services offered by the ministry. None.
Okay. Charles, over to you.
All right, Minister, I know we're wrapping up now, but I think Dr. Rose wanted to ask you so many questions. He came in late, so he had to make up for his question. But I think you have hit it, Minister, is that there are a lot of problems in our homes, in our communities. And as Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village to raise a child. When you and I were growing up and Dr. Rose were growing up, I know the village was involved in our upbringing. Now it has changed. So we hope we can get back the community-based arrangement that you're looking forward to, with the leaders in the community, with the religious leaders, with all the civic leaders, whoever they are, that together they will work with you and your ministry to ensure that. The thing is, once we can identify the problem, then we can start to get the solution to the problem. And unless we do that, we're going to be jumping all over the place without having a holistic approach to solving our problem. So, Minister, I think you have a good grasp of it, and I really want to wish you all the best in your ministry. I know your plate is full, but I think your shoulder is broad enough to take care of it. Your experience as President Mahasabha has given you that Dharmic Sabha, has given you that.
And the daughter of a very prominent politician in Guyana.
Exactly, so you have been schooled to do well, and I'm confident that you will do well in your ministries, and we do want to wish you, Minister, all the best in your ministry. You want to say anything in your closing statement?
But Minister, before you say anything, Dr. promise me.
Another question?
No. No, promise me and promise the audience that you at least will go and share some toys to the unfortunate kids in society for the Christmas.
If you've been following me, we've started with hampers, and this week we're doing the toy thing. So tomorrow I'm heading to Region 2 to do some more hampers, and then later on in the week you'll see the toys rolling out. Because aside from the communities, we have a lot of children homes and institutions that fall under the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security. So yes, toys will very much be there. I want to appeal to you, actually. We have started a Wish Upon a Star initiative. So this is open to anyone who wants to partner. So this is where we're dealing with special needs children. They will write to us and they will put it in our Santa mailbox that's across the regions. And this is dealing with children with disabilities, children who have terminal illnesses, children who may have gone through a traumatic episode, or, they may have lost a parent, or they've never had the opportunity to have a wish granted. So we are inviting them. They can wish to meet someone, they can wish to go somewhere, they can wish to give something, or they can wish to receive something. So if those of you who are looking would like to be part of our Wish Upon a Star and make a child's wish come true, then contact us at the ministry so that together we can make those children's wishes come through. It has been a tough year for everyone, but I think the children have had an enormously difficult period, especially being away from their peers and having to deal with parents who may have lost their jobs or, being in difficulty. So I'm hoping that you gentlemen will start off this movement with us. And my last words, as I say thank you to you and thank you to everyone who's tuned in to listen, is to let's move on being selfless. I think if we're selfless, and I operate on a simple philosophy, action thy duty, reward not thy concern. Simply doing without expectation and doing always in the best interest of humanity, the world will be a wonderful place.
Do you accept cash in that program?
Cash or kind. So what we will have is a list of what the children want, and then you can choose what you want to do.
Okay.
Well,
I will enlist, I promise you.
Awesome. Thank you. Minister,
my wife and she already agreed to do it, so she will get on the Savitri Sakai and they will contribute to that program as well. So
awesome.
A beautiful program.
Right.
Yeah. And I will enlist some of my friends as well.
So all they need to do is go on our Facebook page and they will see how to contact us. And through that contact, you can help children. Once you indicate your interest, we will send you what the children want. And then there we go. Everything has to happen before now and Christmas.
So I will have to text you on that because my friends will not do that. They just want a place where they can send the money and you buy whatever the kids want.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you throw that out to all our audience who are watching and those who will watch the program afterwards. Please contact the ministry and make your contribution so you can help one of these unfortunate kids. That will be great.
We have a Facebook page, so you can see what's happening at the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security. Everything that we do, you can be au fait with, and you can definitely jump on the bandwagon or jump on the sleigh without the reindeers.
Okay, good.
All right, Minister, thank you so much. Dr. Rose, thank you so much.
And happy Christmas to you, Minister, and a prosperous New Year.
Merry Christmas and a happy 2021. I hope it's a better year than this one for health and well-being. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
See you. God